Welcome to the analysis of Ed Gein. Throughout this podcast, we will be going through three primary things: Ed's history, Ed's killings, and Ed's horrors and aftermath. In this episode, we will be focusing on Ed's life and history. In this episode, we're going to start things back in 1953. Edward Theodore Gein, born August 27, 1906, was a hardy American farmer with a dark secret. From the outside, Ed seemed like a regular guy, a nice one even, offering to help neighboring farms, going to town frequently, even assisting in town activities. In his quiet hometown of Plainfield, nothing really happened. It was your simple rural town. In fact, it really lives up to his name as Plainfield. Even sometimes I have to ask myself, why here? In this small town where nothing ever happens, why here? Ed did not have it easy growing up. His father was an alcoholic, and his mother was verbally abusive towards him. Ed's only hope was his brother, Henry, who helped him from time to time. Ed never liked his mother until after she died, which then he envied her, even wanted her back. His mother used to chant puritanical religious things to him frequently, going deep into what God means and become intense in explanation. According to my sources, Ed's mother wanted a daughter desperately. She used this desire against Gein and frequently abused him about his gender, resulting in Gein having gender identity issues, which I will address later. I'd love to go into detail about the type of man Ed's father was, but unfortunately, there's just not enough information presented about him. All that, and it seems to be anyone out there knows that is that he wasn't a very prominent figure in Ed's life. They lived in an isolated farmhouse on the outskirts of the city of Plainfield. During his early years as a child, Ed was turned off from any childhood interaction, and his whole life consisted of his mother, father, and brother. In 1940, Ed's father would pass away due to heart failure from his alcoholism, leaving Ed and Henry to provide for the family. In 1944, Ed and his brother Henry would set out to burn some crops in the field. But as it turns out, only one of the brothers would make it back alive. As it continued, the fire would spread out of control. When the firefighters arrived, Ed told them that Henry had just vanished. While this brings some speculation as to the conflict, only Ed would be the only person to ever know what would truly happen on that fateful day. Whatever the case, this meant that the only people left in the Gein family was Ed's mother and himself. This would send Ed into a deep, dark spiral. After his brother's death, his mother's health would start a rapid decline. Augusta, his mother, would have a series of strokes over a course of 5 years. During this time period, Ed would not leave his mother's side and withheld all relationships. Finally, in 1945, his mother's last stroke would prove to be fatal. Following her death, Ed boarded up the house windows and retired the kitchen in perfect order in respect of his mother. He would then turn to darkness, reading death cult magazines involving cannibalism and Nazi atrocities. After this horrible childhood, Ed turned himself into a hermit. Yet only these horrors would continue to get worse. That concludes episode 1 of the podcast. Please stick around next week for episode 2, where we will be going over Ed's victims. Thank you. Goodbye. Welcome to episode 2 of the analysis of Ed Gein. In this episode, we will be focusing on the killing that Ed Gein did over the course of the decade of his terrors. During the decade after his mother died, Ed would turn the house into a shrine of his mother, keeping specific parts of the house in perfect condition and other parts in perfect condition. In other parts of the house, however, it was an accurate picture of what was going on inside Ed's head. Absolute insanity. Trash piled up head high, dishes and glass everywhere, and mounds of indescribable items everywhere. Living in this condition definitely did not help Ed's condition, and I believe his insanity led to his first murder. His first murder was of the woman named Mary Hogan, age 54. She worked at the only place Ed ever regularly visited. It was a small bar outside of town that would sell to people regardless of age. When asked about the disappearance of the woman, questioned by the townspeople, he would always reply with something as simple as, "Oh, she's not missing. She's up at the house." People never questioned it, though, as he seemed to be quite odd, and no one really took him seriously. They all thought maybe he gone loony, which maybe he had, maybe he had not. The only way to find out is to be in his shoes. According to my sources and various sources all around the internet, many people believe that he killed Mary because she strangely reminded him of his mother. The next murderer was the murder of a woman named Bernice Worden, age 58. This was the murder that would get him arrested. Bernice owned a hardware store in town. Ed entered the shop, asked for a half-gallon of antifreeze, and then proceeded to fill up his car with the antifreeze that he had purchased. He came back inside and asked Worden to bring down a rifle he saw in the window. When Miss Worden turned her back to grab the gun and show it to Ed, he would proceed to shoot her in the back of the head and ultimately kill her. He then loaded her corpse into his truck and went home. Now you may be asking, why was no one there to hear anything? According to a local who lived in Gein's days, the town was regularly a ghost town. This was due to the first day of deer season, no one was in the town. It was silent. No one heard what happened. No one actually knew what happened until a few hours later. Miss Warden's son was the first one to know she was missing. He was greeted at the front door of the store with a pool of blood that was from his mother. He then immediately suspected that Ed was the killer because Ed had been bugging her the past few days. A final piece of evidence, though, secured the suspicion to the police. The receipt of the antifreeze was found in the trash can of the building. The thing that suspiciously ties these two killings together, though, is the fact that the women were killed because they reminded him of his mother. No one knew quite as why as he would do such a thing as kill someone for his mother, but these are just the facts. Overall, the motives behind the killings were not specifically identified as being true or not. We can only assume, due to the persistence and expectations of his mother, that Ed would kill because of the reasons that people think he did. Thank you for joining me for episode 2 of this podcast. Episode 3 will be revolving around what Ed did with the victims after and what happened after the fact of Ed's death. Welcome to episode 3 and the final episode of this podcast, the analysis of Ed Gein. In this episode, we will be focusing on the many things Ed did with his victims after death. Ed may not ring as much of a bell as maybe the name of Ted Bundy or any other major killer, but the crimes that he committed are just as gruesome. In total, the 10 bodies that Ed came across all found a use after the owner died. After being arrested, the police began to search Ed's house. The first things they noticed was someone being hung by the feet and decapitated. They soon realized that this was the body of Ed's second and most recent victim, Bernice Warden. As they continued to search the house, they found things such as, and this is a lengthy list, so buckle up, bones, whole skulls on bedposts, bowls made of human heads made of bowls. Who would do such a thing? They also found countless items made from human skin. Authorities found chairs that were upholstered with human skin, a wastebasket made of skin, a mask made of faces from humans, a belt made of nipples. A belt made of nipples, come on. They also saw a corset made of a female body. This included the legs, the torso, the mask, everything. They also found a lampshade made out of 4 human faces. They found the genitals of women, 4 noses, and the remains of Ed's first kill, Mary Hogan. In my opinion, however, the most horrifying part is what he did to the people in graveyards. Over a course of 44 nightly visits to the local Plainfield cemetery, he would dig up people in graveyards, rip the skin off of the cadavers to make a skin suit so he can give his best shot at emulating the look of his mother. He explained to authorities, "I wanted to make a woman so I could crawl into her skin," talking about his mother in this case. Despite all of these killings and gruesome scenes, Ed was sentenced to life in prison, but was pronounced clinically insane, which ended up deflecting his jail sentence and instead put him in countless medical institutions for the rest of his life. Ed Gein died on July 26th, 1984. He died in a mental health institute, and he's now buried next to his family in Plainfield Cemetery, right in his hometown. And from there concludes my podcast, The Analysis of Ed Gein. I do want to leave you, though, with a few questions before I go. Do you think Ed was clinically insane? Do you think he should have gotten jail time or even a death sentence for what he did? What do you think impact Ed's mom had on his life? Do you think if his brother would stay alive, he would have a different turnout? These are just a few of the things to think about when it comes to a murderer such as Ed. Our thoughts and prayers always go out to the families and the victims. Thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next awesome podcast that I probably will never...